What if I told you that my own mother publicly humiliated me at my brother's birthday party for bringing a $4 gift when I'd actually been secretly sending them $4,000 every month for years? The look on her face when I revealed the truth in front of everyone changed our family forever. But was I wrong to finally stand up for myself? They say family is everything, but what happens when your own family makes you feel like nothing? I'm Emily, and for 25 years I lived in my younger brother's shadow. Lucas was the golden child, the artist, the one who could do no wrong, and me, I was just there, expected to smile, stay quiet, and pick up the pieces when things went wrong. But 3 months ago, I did something that changed everything. I closed an account. One simple action that brought my entire family to their knees. And for the first time in my life, they actually saw me. You see, my parents had this unspoken rule. Lucas was the dreamer who needed protection. I was the practical one who needed to provide it. When he needed art supplies, I worked double shifts. When he needed college tuition, I took out loans. When my parents couldn't make ends meet because they were funding his dreams, guess who they called? But that night, at Lucas's 25th birthday party, something snapped. I walked in with my modest gift ready to celebrate my brother like I always did. What I got instead was public humiliation that cut so deep I'm still feeling it. My mother looked at my gift and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Really, Emily, you could only manage $4 after everything we've done for you." $4. The room went silent. Aunts, uncles, family, friends, all staring at me like I was some kind of deadbeat sister. My face burned with shame. But then something clicked. Something that had been building for years finally erupted. I looked my mother straight in the eye and said, "You mean the $4,000 I transfer to your account every month, that for..." The look on her face, the way the entire room shifted, that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I realized I had been invisible for so long, even my own sacrifices were erased from their memory. But this story isn't just about money. It's about what happens when the family scapegoat finally stops accepting the blame. It's about the price of standing up for yourself when you've spent your whole life staying small. And it's about discovering that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who need to earn that love back. To understand how I became invisible, you have to go back to where it all started. Columbus, Ohio. A modest 2-story house on Maple Street where the Johnson family lived what everyone thought was the perfect American dream. I was 7 when Lucas was born. 7 years old, and suddenly I went from being the center of my parents' world to being the responsible older sister who needed to set a good example. While other kids my age were playing with dolls, I was changing diapers and warming bottles. But I didn't mind. I loved my baby brother. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine the way he'd stop crying when I sang to him. I thought being a big sister was the most important job in the world. What I didn't realize was that this was just the beginning of a pattern that would define the next 18 years of my life. When Lucas turned 5, he showed an interest in drawing. Mom and Dad were over the moon. Our little artist, and they'd say, hanging his crayon scribbles on the refrigerator like they were masterpieces. Meanwhile, I was bringing home straight A's honor roll certificates, academic achievement awards. Those went into a drawer in the kitchen. "Good job, sweetie," Mom would say, barely looking up from Lucas's latest creation. By the time I was 12 and Lucas was 5, our roles were crystal clear. I was the one who did chores. I was the one who helped with homework, even though I had my own to finish. I was the one who sacrificed Saturday morning cartoons to watch Lucas while Mom and Dad ran errands. And Lucas was the one who got to be a kid. I remember this one Saturday morning when I was about 13. I had been invited to Sarah Mitchell's sleepover. It was the first time anyone had invited me anywhere, and I was so excited I could barely sleep the night before. I had already packed my overnight bag, picked out my favorite pajamas. But that morning, Mom came into my room with that look. The one I'd learned to dread. "Emily, honey, your dad and I need to go help Grandma move some furniture. Lucas has a fever, so we can't take him with us." You'll need to stay home and watch him. I felt my heart sink into my stomach. But Mom Sarah's party. There will be other parties, sweetheart. Family comes first. Family comes first. I heard that phrase so many times growing up, I started to believe it actually meant Lucas comes first and you come last. I called Sarah to cancel. I spent that Saturday giving Lucas medicine, making him soup, and watching cartoons I'd outgrown years ago. By Sunday, his fever was gone, and he was running around the backyard like nothing had happened. But I never got invited to another sleepover. The thing is, I don't think my parents were trying to be cruel. They genuinely believed they were teaching me responsibility, making me stronger. But what they were actually teaching me was that my needs didn't matter, that my job in this family was to serve, not to be served. And Lucas, he learned that the world revolved around him, that big sister would always be there to clean up his messes, and mom and dad would always choose his needs over mine. When Lucas started middle school, his artistic talents really began to shine. He could draw anything, paint anything. His teachers called him gifted. My parents called him special. And suddenly, our house became a shrine to Lucas Johnson, future famous artist. Art supplies filled the garage. Canvases lined the basement walls. Every conversation at dinner was about Lucas's latest project, his art teacher's praise, his potential scholarship opportunities. I was 15 then, getting ready for my SATs, applying for AP classes, working part-time at the local library to save money for college. But when relatives asked about us kids, it was always, Lucas is so talented, and Emily is doing fine in school. Just fine. That's how they saw me, the reliable one who was just fine. But here's what they didn't see. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, I'd sit in my room and wonder what it would feel like to be the favorite. To have mom look at my report card, the way she looked at Lucas's paintings. To have dad brag about my achievements, the way he bragged about Lucas's artistic vision. I'd stare at my academic awards and wonder why being smart wasn't as valuable as being creative. Why my practical dreams of business school weren't as worthy as Lucas's artistic ambitions. And slowly, quietly, I learned to stay silent even when I deserved to speak. I learned that asking for attention was selfish. I learned that being overlooked was just my role in this family. But every pattern has a breaking point. Every person has a limit. And 25 years later, sitting in that birthday party, watching my mother dismiss my sacrifice like it meant nothing, I finally reached mine. High school was supposed to be my time to shine. I was 16, Lucas was 9, and I thought maybe finally I'd get some recognition for who I was becoming. I threw myself into everything. Student council, debate team, honor, society, volunteer work at the local food bank. My GPA was perfect. My SAT scores were in the 95th percentile. I was building a future, brick by brick. Meanwhile, Lucas was building castles in the air with watercolors and clay. The breaking point came during my junior year. I had worked for months on a history project about women's suffrage. My teacher, Mrs. Henderson, was so impressed she submitted it to the state competition. When I found out I'd won first place, I ran home with the certificate clutched in my hands, my heart pounding with excitement. Mom, Dad, I won. I won the state history competition. Mom was in the kitchen cleaning paint brushes. Lucas's art supplies were spread across the entire dining table. Again. That's wonderful, honey, she said without looking up. Can you help me clean? Lucas has a big art showcase at school tomorrow and we need to get his pieces ready. I stood there, holding my certificate, watching my mother scrub blue paint from a brush, like it was the most important thing in the world. Mom, did you hear what I said? I won. At the state level, there were hundreds of entries. I heard you, Emily. I'm very proud. Now, can you please help? We have so much to do for Lucas's showcase. That night, I put my certificate in the drawer with all the others. But this time, something felt different. This time, the silence in my chest felt like screaming. Lucas's art showcase was beautiful. I won't lie about that. He had real talent, and watching him light up as people praised his work should have made me happy. But all I could think about was my certificate in the drawer. My achievement that lasted exactly 30 seconds in my mother's attention span. The worst part, Aunt Maria was there. She was Dad's sister, the only person in our family who ever seemed to really see me. After the showcase, she pulled me aside. Emily, I heard about your state competition win. That's incredible, sweetheart. You should be so proud. The fact that my aunt knew about something my parents had already forgotten made me want to cry. Thanks, Aunt Maria. She studied my face for a moment. Are you okay? I wanted to tell her everything. How invisible I felt, how tired I was of being the responsible one. How much it hurt to watch Lucas get celebrated for finger paintings, while my academic achievements were treated like homework to be filed away. But I was 16 and scared and didn't have the words yet. So I just nodded and said, I'm fine. But Aunt Maria's eyes told me she wasn't buying it. She'd been watching. She'd been noticing. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't completely alone in seeing the imbalance. Senior year was when things really escalated. I had been accepted to Ohio State with a partial academic scholarship. Not a full ride, but enough to make college affordable if I worked part-time and took out some loans. I was proud of that scholarship. I had earned it through 4 years of perfect grades and extracurricular dedication. The celebration dinner lasted exactly as long as it took Dad to say, "That's great, Em. Very practical." 3 weeks later, Lucas, now 11, got accepted into a summer art intensive program. A prestigious camp that cost $3,000 for 6 weeks. Money we definitely didn't have. But somehow we found it. It's an investment in his future, Mom explained when I asked how we could afford it. This program could open doors for Lucas that might never open again. I wanted to ask, what about my future? What about the doors my scholarship was opening? But I had learned that asking those questions made me sound selfish and ungrateful, so I took a second job that summer. While Lucas was at art camp learning from professional instructors and networking with other young artists, I was working doubles at the movie theater and the library, saving every penny I could for college expenses that my partial scholarship wouldn't cover. I told myself it was temporary, that once I got to college, things would be different. I'd be around people who valued academic achievement. I'd find my place, my people, my voice. But even at college, my family's patterns followed me. Lucas would call crying about some middle school drama, and Mom would call me demanding I talk to him because he looks up to you so much. Dad would call asking for advice about Lucas's high school art portfolio because you're so good at organizing things. Even 2 hours away, I was still the family's emotional support system. And when I came home for breaks, nothing had changed. Lucas's artwork covered every wall. His achievements filled every conversation. His needs dictated every family decision. During winter break of my sophomore year in college, I made one last attempt to be seen. The dean's list certificates were piling up. I had maintained a 3.9 GPA while working 20 hours a week. I had been inducted into the Business Honor Society. I brought all of it home, spread it out on the kitchen table after dinner, and said, I wanted to show you guys what I've been achieving at school. Dad glanced over. Very impressive, Emily. You've always been so responsible. Mom barely looked up from helping Lucas with his high school art applications. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Lucas, don't forget to mention your portfolio diversity in this essay. I gathered up my certificates and went to my room. That night, I stared at the ceiling and made a decision that would change everything, though I didn't know it yet. I decided to stop trying to earn their attention. I decided to focus on building a life where I wouldn't need their validation to feel worthy. But what I didn't realize was that this decision would lead me down a path where I'd end up giving them everything while expecting nothing in return. And for the next few years, that's exactly what I did. I gave and gave and gave until the night of Lucas's 25th birthday party, when I realized they'd forgotten I was capable of giving it all. College graduation should have been one of the proudest days of my life. I walked across that stage with my business degree, summa cum laude, with a job offer already in hand at a respected marketing firm in Columbus. I had done everything right, everything by the book. My parents came to the ceremony. They sat in the audience and clapped when my name was called. But I could see Mom checking her phone during the speech, probably texting Lucas about his latest art project. Dad kept glancing at his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at Olive Garden. Not exactly the celebration I'd imagined, but it was something. "We're proud of you, Emily," Dad said over breadsticks. "You've always been so self-sufficient." Self-sufficient. There was that word again. The word that meant, we don't have to worry about you because you'll figure it out on your own. Thanks, Dad. Now, we need to talk about Lucas, Mom said, and my heart sank. Even on my graduation day, the conversation would inevitably turn to my brother. Lucas was 17, then a senior in high school with genuine artistic talent and big dreams. He'd been accepted to the Art Institute of Chicago, one of the most prestigious art schools in the country. It was an incredible opportunity, the kind that could launch a real career. The problem was money. The tuition was $42,000 a year. Even with the partial scholarship he'd received, we were looking at over $30,000 annually that my parents simply didn't have. "We've been looking at our finances," Dad continued, "and we just can't make it work. Your mother's been working extra shifts at the hospital, and I've been taking on overtime, but it's not enough." I knew what was coming before he said it. I could see it in the way they looked at me like I was a solution to a problem, rather than a daughter at her own graduation dinner. "We were hoping maybe you could help out a little, just until we get back on our feet." A little. That's what they called it. A little help. Within 6 months of starting my job, I was living in a tiny studio apartment that cost $800 a month and sending $4,000 home every month to help with Lucas's tuition and my parents' mounting bills. Let me put that in perspective for you. I was making $48,000 a year before taxes. After taxes, insurance, and basic living expenses, I had almost nothing left. I was eating ramen noodles for dinner and shopping at thrift stores, so my brother could attend his dream school. But here's the thing that still breaks my heart when I think about it. I did it willingly. I told myself it was temporary, that it was what family did for each other. I convinced myself that someday, when Lucas was established and successful, he'd remember what I sacrificed for him. I worked 60-hour weeks taking on every freelance project I could find. I hadn't bought new clothes in months. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic that made concerning noises every time I started it. But Lucas was thriving in Chicago, posting pictures on social media of his art installations and gallery showings. And my parents, they acted like the money just appeared in their account every month. Like it was some kind of miracle, rather than their daughter working herself to exhaustion. The few times I came home to visit, the conversations were always about Lucas's latest achievements. His professors loved him. His work was being featured in student exhibitions. He was networking with established artists. "You should see his latest piece," Mom would gush, showing me photos on her phone. "His instructor says he has real commercial potential." I'd smile and nod and ask all the right questions while internally calculating how many extra hours I'd need to work to cover the art supplies Lucas needed for his next project. It was during this time that I met James. He was a graphic designer at a company we worked with occasionally, and somehow, despite my exhaustion and stress, we started dating. James was kind. He was patient. He listened when I talked about work, and he never made me feel like I was asking too much when I suggested cheap date ideas, because I genuinely couldn't afford anything else. But I never told him about the money I was sending home. I was too ashamed. How do you explain to someone that you're living like a broke college student because you're funding your brother's expensive education? How do you admit that your own family sees you as an ATM rather than a person? 6 months into our relationship, James started talking about moving in together. He'd found this beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in a better part of town. The rent was $1,500 split between us, would be $750 each. Still manageable if I wasn't sending $4,000 home every month. But I was sending $4,000 home every month. "I need to think about it," I told him, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. We spent almost every night together anyway. Moving in together made perfect sense, both financially and emotionally. Except it didn't make sense when I was quietly bankrolling my brother's art career. That night, I sat in my tiny studio apartment and really looked at my life. At 23 years old, I was living like I was 18. My furniture was secondhand. My refrigerator was mostly empty. I hadn't had a vacation since college. I hadn't bought myself anything nice in over a year. And for what? So Lucas could have the college experience I never got to have so he could focus on his art, while I focused on making sure he could afford to focus on his art. I called my parents the next morning. It was a Saturday, and I knew they'd be having their weekly breakfast at the local diner, probably discussing Lucas's latest project or scholarship application. Hi, Mom, it's Emily. I wanted to talk to you about the financial arrangement we have. Oh, honey, you're a lifesaver. Did you see the pictures Lucas sent from his gallery showing last week? He sold 2 pieces. That's great, Mom. Listen, I've been thinking about reducing the amount I send each month. I'm looking at moving to a better apartment and… Emily, her voice turned cold. We've talked about this. This is temporary. Lucas is so close to finishing school, and then he'll be able to help out. You know how important this is for his future. What about my future? The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Your future is secure, Emily. You have a good job, you're independent. Lucas needs this support right now. Surely you can see that. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious years earlier. In my parents' eyes, my success wasn't something to celebrate. It was something to exploit. I was succeeding despite getting no support, so clearly I didn't need any. Lucas was struggling because he was an artist, so clearly he needed everything. I stayed in my studio apartment. I told James I wasn't ready to move in together yet, which put a strain on our relationship that I could feel growing week by week. And I kept sending the money, $4,000 every month like clockwork. But something had shifted inside me that day. A small, quiet rebellion was beginning to grow. I started keeping track of exactly how much I was sending. I started screenshotting the transfers. I started documenting everything. I didn't know why I was doing it at the time. I just had this feeling that someday, somehow I was going to need proof of what I had sacrificed. 2 years later, standing in that birthday party, watching my mother dismiss my gift as inadequate, I realized that someday had finally come. Lucas's 25th birthday party was supposed to be a celebration. He had just graduated from the Art Institute, and his portfolio was impressive enough that he'd already had interest from several galleries in Chicago. My parents were over the moon. Their investment in his education was finally paying off. The party was at my parents' house, the same house where I'd grown up feeling invisible. Mom had decorated with Lucas's artwork, turning the living room into a personal gallery showcase. Every wall displayed his evolution as an artist, from those childhood crayon drawings to sophisticated mixed media pieces that actually took my breath away. I won't lie. I was proud of him. Despite everything, despite the years of resentment I'd been carrying, seeing Lucas's work displayed like that filled me with genuine sisterly pride. I had spent weeks thinking about what to get him for his birthday. Money was still tight, because yes, I was still sending $4,000 home every month, even though he'd graduated. My parents had explained that Lucas needed time to get established, to build his client base, to transition from student to professional artist. So I was still living in my tiny studio, still eating ramen, still wearing the same clothes I'd bought 2 years ago. But I wanted to get Lucas something meaningful for his birthday. I finally settled on a vintage art book I'd found at a used bookstore downtown. It was a collection of work by Jean-Michel Basquiat, one of Lucas's favorite artists. The book was in perfect condition, and I could tell it was something special. It cost me $60, which was a lot for my budget, but it felt right. I wrapped it carefully and wrote a heartfelt note inside the cover. To Lucas, your talent has always amazed me. I can't wait to see where your art takes you next. Love, Emily. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. Aunts, uncles, family, friends, some of Lucas's college buddies who'd driven down from Chicago. Everyone was mingling, admiring his artwork, talking about his bright future. I found Lucas in the kitchen, surrounded by a group of his friends, who were asking him about his post-graduation plans. He looked happy, confident, excited about what came next. For a moment, I remembered the little boy who used to show me his drawings, who'd ask me to hang them on the refrigerator. Emily, he broke away from his friends and gave me a hug. I'm so glad you're here. Happy birthday, little brother. I brought you something. I handed him the wrapped book and he tore into it with the enthusiasm he'd had as a kid on Christmas morning. When he saw what it was, his face lit up. Emily, this is incredible. Look at this. He flipped through the pages, showing his friends some of the reproductions. Basquiat is one of my biggest influences. Where did you find this? I have my sources, I said, feeling warm and happy that I'd chosen well. That happiness lasted exactly 10 more minutes. Mom had called everyone into the living room for the gift opening. Lucas sat in the center of the couch while family members presented their gifts. Uncle Tom had gotten him a professional easel. Aunt Sarah had bought him a set of high-end brushes. Cousin Mike had given him a gift card to an art supply store. Then it was my turn again, and I realized with growing horror that everyone was going to see my modest book gift next to these expensive presents. Actually, I already gave Lucas his gift, I said quickly. He loved it, but Mom wasn't having it. Nonsense, Emily. Bring it out here so everyone can see. Lucas held up the Basquiat book and I watched Mom's face fall. Not with disappointment, but with something worse. Embarrassment. Oh, she said, and the single word carried so much judgment it felt like a slap. That's nice. The room had gotten quiet. I could feel people looking at me, then at the book, then back at me. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then Mom said the words that would change everything. Really, Emily, you could only manage $4 after everything we've done for you. $4. She thought I'd bought my brother a $4 gift from a clearance bin somewhere. She announced it to a room full of family and friends, like I was some kind of cheapskate sister who couldn't be bothered to spend money on her brother's milestone birthday. The shame hit me like a physical blow. My face burned, my hands started shaking. I could feel every eye in the room on me, could practically hear the judgment forming in their minds. Poor Emily. Always been a little selfish. Never really appreciated what her family did for her. But then, something else hit me. Something bigger than shame. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage at the unfairness of it all. At spending 2.5 years living like I was broke so Lucas could have his dream education. At working 60-hour weeks so he could focus on his art. At sacrificing my own life, my own dreams, my own relationship for his success. And she thought I'd spent $4 on his birthday gift. The room was still silent. Everyone was waiting for me to respond, to defend myself, to make some excuse about money being tight. Instead, I looked my mother straight in the eye and said, "You mean the $4,000 I transfer to your account every month?" That I will never forget the look on her face. Complete and total shock, like I'd just spoken a foreign language. Her mouth literally fell open. "What are you talking about?" she said, but her voice was smaller now, uncertain. "The $4,000, I repeated louder this time, so everyone in the room could hear. "The $4,000 I've been sending you every month for the past 2.5 years to pay for Lucas's school and help with your bills. The $4,000, that's the reason I live in a studio apartment and drive a car that's older than my nephew. That $4,000. The silence in the room was deafening now. I could see Uncle Tom's eyebrows shoot up. Aunt Maria's hand had gone to her mouth. Lucas was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Emily, that's not," Mom started, but I cut her off. $96,000. The number came out steady and clear. "That's how much I've sent you in total. I have the bank records to prove it." Dad had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" "Ask your wife," I said, standing up. "Ask her about the $4 gift." I looked around the room, at all these people who'd watched me grow up, who'd seen me as the practical, responsible one, the one who always had everything under control. I wondered how many of them had judged me over the years for not being as special as Lucas, for not needing as much attention or support. For 2.5 years, I said to the room, I've been working myself to exhaustion to support this family financially. And in all that time, not once has anyone asked me how I'm doing. Not once has anyone wondered why I never seem to have money for nice things, or vacations, or even a decent apartment. My voice was getting stronger, now steadier. But I buy my brother a $60 vintage art book for his birthday, and suddenly I'm the selfish one who only spent $4. Lucas finally found his voice. Emily, I didn't know. I had no idea you were sending money. I looked at him, this brother I'd sacrificed so much for, and realized he was telling the truth. He genuinely had no idea where the money for his education had come from. In his mind, our parents had just figured it out somehow. Of course you didn't know, I said softly. Because no one ever told you. No one ever said, Emily is working 2 jobs so you can go to art school, or Emily is living like a broke college student so we can afford your tuition. You just got to focus on your art and assumed the money fairy was handling the rest. The party was over. There was no coming back from this. People were starting to gather their things, making awkward excuses about early mornings and long drives home. But I wasn't done yet. I had 2.5 years of silence to break. I love you, Lucas. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. But I'm done being invisible. I'm done being taken for granted. And I'm definitely done being called selfish by people who've been living off my sacrifice without even acknowledging it. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Mom calling my name, her voice high and panicked. But I didn't turn around. I had finally been seen, and there was no going back to being invisible after that. I drove home in complete silence. No music, no radio, just the sound of my 10-year-old Honda struggling up the hills between my parents' house and my studio apartment. My hands were still shaking from adrenaline, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What had I just done? For 25 years, I had been the quiet one, the accommodating one, the one who never made waves. And in the span of 5 minutes, I had detonated a bomb in the middle of my family's carefully constructed narrative. I parked outside my building and sat in the car for a long time, staring up at the narrow windows of my studio apartment. The same apartment I'd been living in for 2.5 years, because every extra dollar went to my family. The same apartment where I ate dinner alone every night while Lucas posted pictures of his college social life on Instagram. My phone started buzzing. Text after text, call after call. Mom, Dad, even Lucas. I turned it off and went upstairs. My apartment felt different that night. Smaller somehow, but also more mine than it had ever been. I looked around at my secondhand furniture, my tiny kitchen, my bed that doubled as a couch, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd forgotten what it was called. Peace. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had been building for months, maybe years, had finally found its release. What I felt now was clarity. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking app. There it was, the automatic transfer I'd set up 2.5 years ago. $4,000 scheduled to go out on the 1st of every month like clockwork. I canceled it. It took 30 seconds. 1 click, confirm password done. The transfer that had been draining my life for over 2 years was gone. Then I did something I hadn't done since college. I ordered pizza. Not frozen pizza, not ramen with an egg cracked into it. Real pizza from the good place down the street that I'd been walking past for months, telling myself I couldn't afford it. While I waited for the delivery, I started doing math. $4,000 a month. $48,000 a year. In 1 year, I could move to a real apartment. I could buy a reliable car. I could take a vacation. I could live like a normal 25-year-old instead of like someone's indentured servant. The pizza arrived, and I ate 3 slices while sitting on my bed couch watching Netflix on my 5-year-old laptop. It was the best meal I'd had in months. My phone stayed off all night. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a different person. Lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even realize was there until it was gone. I made coffee, real coffee, instead of the instant stuff I'd been buying to save money, and sat by my window watching the city wake up. Around 10 a.m., I finally turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, 2 voicemails. I scrolled through the texts first. Most were from mom, progressing from confused to angry to desperate. Emily, we need to talk about what happened tonight. I don't understand why you're so upset. We've always supported you. Your father and I are very hurt by what you said. Call me back immediately. Emily, this is ridiculous. Call me. We need to discuss this like adults. Dad's texts were shorter, but somehow more cutting. Your mother is very upset. This needs to be resolved. We'll talk when you're ready to be reasonable. But it was Lucas's messages that hit me the hardest. I had no idea about the money. Can we talk? I feel terrible. I never wanted you to sacrifice for me. Please call me back. I want to understand what happened. I listened to the voicemails. The first was Mom, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. Emily, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this behavior is unacceptable. We are a family, and families help each other. You've always been dramatic, but this is too much. Call me back so we can sort this out. The second was Dad, and his tone was different. Calmer, more measured, but somehow more threatening because of it. Emily, your mother told me what happened at the party. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We need to sit down and discuss this rationally. There are things you don't understand about our financial situation. I deleted both voicemails without listening to them again. Then, I did something that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. I drafted a text message to my family group chat. I've canceled the monthly transfers. I need time to think about our relationship and my role in this family. Please respect my space while I figure things out. I read it 3 times before sending it. My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute. Then I sent it. The response was immediate. My phone started buzzing with incoming calls and texts. I turned it off again. Over the next week, I began to understand what freedom felt like. I went to work, did my job, came home to my tiny apartment. But for the first time in years, I wasn't constantly calculating how many extra hours I needed to work to cover the monthly transfer. I wasn't lying awake at night worrying about money. James called on Wednesday. We hadn't spoken since the weekend before Lucas's party, and I could hear the concern in his voice. Hey, I just wanted to check in. You seemed stressed last week. I found myself telling him everything. The money, the family dynamics, the birthday party, confrontation. All of it came pouring out like a dam had burst. Emily, he said when I finished, why didn't you tell me about this before? Because I was ashamed, I said. And it was the truth. Because I didn't want you to think my family was using me. Because I didn't want to admit that I was letting them. You weren't letting them do anything, he said firmly. You were being generous and loving, and they were taking advantage of it. That weekend, James helped me move to a real apartment. Not the fancy 2-bedroom he'd suggested months earlier, but a decent 1-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with a working dishwasher and windows that let in actual sunlight. As I packed up my few belongings from the studio, I found the drawer where I'd been keeping all my academic awards and certificates. Honors from high school dean's list, certificates from college employee of the month awards from work. Years of achievements that had been met with polite indifference by my family. I packed them carefully in a box marked Emily's Accomplishments and put them in a place of honor in my new apartment. For the first time in my adult life, I was living within my means instead of below them. I could afford groceries without checking my bank balance. I could replace my worn-out work clothes. I could save money for the future instead of sending it into the black hole of my family's expectations. But the best part wasn't the money. The best part was the silence. No more guilt about not doing enough. No more anxiety about whether I could afford to help with the next family crisis. No more wondering why my sacrifices were invisible while everyone else's needs were urgent. It took me 2 weeks to realize that this feeling had a name. Self-respect, And once I remembered what it felt like to respect myself, there was no going back to a life where I didn't. 3 weeks into my new life, the real pressure campaign began. It started subtly the way these things always do in families. A call from Aunt Maria sounding concerned and confused. "Emily, honey, your mother called me. She's very worried about you. She says you've cut off all financial support without any explanation." No explanation. That's how Mom had spun it to the family. Poor, confused Emily had just stopped helping for no reason at all, leaving her struggling parents and newly graduated brother in financial distress. "Aunt Maria," I said carefully, "did Mom mention why I stopped sending money?" There was a pause. "She said you had some kind of outburst at Lucas's party. But honey, I know how much your family has done for you over the years. Surely whatever happened can be worked out." How much my family had done for me. I almost laughed, but it came out as more of a choke. "What exactly did they tell you they've done for me?" "Well, they raised you, supported you through college, gave you a foundation to build your career on. Emily, I know you're independent, but family is family." This was their strategy then. Rewrite history. Make my rebellion look like selfishness and ingratitude rather than self-preservation. "Aunt Maria, can I ask you something? In all the conversations you've had with my parents about me over the years, have they ever mentioned that I've been sending them $4,000 a month for the past 2.5 years? The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. "What? $4,000 a month? $96,000 total, to pay for Lucas's college and help with their bills. Did they mention that part?" "Emily, that can't be right. That's almost your entire salary." "Exactly." I could hear her breathing change, could practically hear her recalculating everything she thought she knew about our family dynamics. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Emily, I had no idea. They told everyone that Lucas had scholarships, that they'd managed to make his education work somehow. They did make it work. With my money." After Aunt Maria hung up, I knew the story would start spreading through the family. The real story, not the sanitized version my parents had been telling. The next wave of calls came from cousins, older relatives, family friends. Some were supportive once they learned the truth. Others seemed angry that I disrupted the family harmony they thought we'd had. But it was my grandmother's call that nearly broke me. Grandma Rose was 83 years old and had always been the matriarch of our family. When she called, her voice was sharp with disapproval. "Emily, Catherine Johnson, I am ashamed of you." Whew! She used my full name the way she had when I was 7 and had tracked mud through her house. "Grandma, don't you grandma me. Your parents called me in tears. Your mother can barely function. She's so upset by your behavior. And poor Lucas, that boy, is beside himself with guilt." Poor Lucas. Even now, even after everything, he was still the victim in their narrative. "Did they tell you about the money, Grandma?" "What money, Emily? You're talking nonsense." So they hadn't told her. Of course they hadn't. Why complicate their story with facts? I took a deep breath. "Grandma, for the past 2.5 years, I've been sending Mom and Dad $4,000 every month to help pay for Lucas's college and their bills. That's why I've been living in a tiny apartment, why I never have money for family events, why I've looked tired every time you've seen me." The silence was different this time, heavier. $4,000, she repeated slowly. "Every month, $96,000 total. And they never mentioned this to anyone. Apparently not. I could hear her processing this, could imagine her sharp mind working through the implications. "Emily," she said finally, and her voice was softer now. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I thought it was temporary. Because I thought they'd appreciate it eventually. Because I thought that's what good daughters do." Oh, sweetheart, those 2 words held more understanding and compassion than I'd received from my parents in years. "But Grandma, I need you to know I'm not angry anymore. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just can't keep living like this. I can't keep being invisible while I sacrifice everything for people who don't even see the sacrifice." You're not invisible to me, she said quietly. You never have been. I've been watching you work yourself to death for years, and I've been wondering why such a smart, accomplished young woman always looks so tired and stressed. After we hung up, I felt something shift in the family dynamic. Grandma Rose was respected by everyone, and if she understood my side, others would start questioning the narrative my parents had been spinning. But not everyone was ready to see the truth. Uncle David called the next day, and his tone was accusatory from the first word. Emily, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to grow up and stop this nonsense. What nonsense, Uncle David? This whole financial victim act. Your parents have given you everything, and now you're punishing them because they asked for a little help. A little help. $4,000 a month for 2.5 years was a little help. Uncle David, did anyone in the family know that I was sending money to my parents? Of course not, because it's none of our business. But even if you were so, what? They're your parents. You owe them. You owe them. There it was, the belief system that had kept me trapped for years. The idea that successful children were obligated to financially support their parents, regardless of the cost to their own lives. I don't owe anyone my entire future, I said. You're being selfish, Emily. And frankly, you're embarrassing the family with this drama. I was embarrassing the family, not the parents who had been quietly draining their daughter's finances while taking credit for their son's success. Not the family members who had judged me for years without knowing the whole story. I was the embarrassment. Uncle David, I respect your opinion, but I'm not changing my mind. Then you're making a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. Maybe, but I'd rather regret standing up for myself than regret spending my entire life being taken advantage of. The calls kept coming for days. Some family members were supportive once they learned the full story. Others remained convinced that I was in the wrong, that family loyalty meant financial obligation, that my parents' needs trumped my own rights. But the call that surprised me the most came from Lucas himself. Emily, can we meet? Please, I need to talk to you face to face. There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Uncertainty, humility, maybe even respect. Okay, I said. But not at Mom and Dad's house. No, definitely. Not there. Can you meet me at that coffee shop downtown? The one where we used to go when we were kids? I remembered that coffee shop. Mom used to take us there on Saturday mornings sometimes, back when Lucas was small and I was still young enough to think being the responsible older sister was a privilege instead of a burden. I'll be there, I said, because despite everything, despite years of feeling invisible and unappreciated, Lucas was still my brother, and maybe it was time for us to have our first real conversation as adults. The coffee shop looked exactly the same as it had 15 years ago. Same mismatched chairs, same chalkboard menu, same smell of roasted beans and fresh pastries. But walking in there as an adult felt surreal, like stepping into a memory that didn't quite fit anymore. Lucas was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee in front of him. He looked up when I walked in, and I was struck by how different he seemed. Gone was the confident, carefree artist from his birthday party. The person sitting across from me looked tired, uncertain, maybe even a little scared. I ordered you a vanilla latte, he said as I sat down. I remembered it was your favorite. It had been my favorite when I was 12. The fact that he remembered something so small from so long ago caught me off guard. Thanks. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us apparently unsure how to start this conversation. Lucas kept running his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. Emily, I need you to know that I genuinely had no idea about the money. I believe you. Do you? He looked up at me with relief. Because I've been going crazy thinking that you might believe I knew and just didn't care. Lucas, you've never been responsible for managing family finances. You've never even had to think about money because it was always just there when you needed it. Why would you question where it came from? He winced. God, that makes me sound so naive. Not naive, sheltered. There's a difference. He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. When did you become so calm about all this? At the party, you were furious. Now, you seem, I don't know, peaceful. Because I'm not angry anymore. Anger was what I felt when I was trapped. Now I'm free. Free from us, you mean? Free from the version of us that wasn't working. The version where I gave everything and got nothing back. Lucas was quiet for a long time, turning his coffee cup in circles on the table. I called the bursar's office at school, he said finally. What? After the party, after I found out about the money, I called the financial aid office. I wanted to see exactly how my tuition was being paid. I felt my stomach tighten. And every semester, a payment of $15,000 came from mom and dad's account, like clockwork. The full amount, always on time. He looked up at me. That was your money, wasn't it? All of it. I nodded. Jesus, Emily, I spent 4 years at one of the most expensive art schools in the country, and you paid for all of it. Not all of it. You had some scholarships. Partial scholarships. The bulk of it was you. He shook his head. Do you know what I was doing while you were working 60-hour weeks to pay my tuition? I was complaining to my friends about how stressed you always seemed. I thought you were just naturally high-strung. The irony of that hit me harder than it should have. Lucas, I need you to understand something. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. What's done is done. But I do feel guilty. I feel sick about it. Emily, you could have had your own apartment, your own life. You could have traveled, dated, bought nice things. Instead, you were living like a broke college student so I could focus on my art. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what happened. Why didn't you say anything? It was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks, because I thought that's what love looked like. I thought sacrifice without recognition was noble. I thought if I just gave enough eventually, someone would notice and appreciate it. We should have noticed. Yes, you should have. Lucas flinched at my directness, but I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was just done softening the truth to make other people comfortable. Emily, what can I do? How can I fix this? You can't fix it, Lucas. You can't give me back 2.5 years of my life. You can't erase the fact that I missed opportunities and experiences because I was funding your dreams. His face fell. So, that's it. We're just done. We're done with the old dynamic, the one where I sacrifice, and you benefit, and nobody acknowledges what's happening. But we don't have to be done as siblings. What does that look like? I leaned forward. It looks like you getting a job and supporting yourself like every other 25-year-old. It looks like mom and dad taking responsibility for their own finances. It looks like me being treated like a daughter and sister instead of like a bank account. I started looking for work last week, he said quietly. Gallery positions, teaching jobs, even commercial art gigs. Anything to start earning my own money. That surprised me. Really, Emily, I may have been clueless about the money, but I'm not stupid. After what happened at the party, I realized I needed to grow up. Fast. For the first time since he'd arrived, I smiled. How's that going? Harder than I thought it would be. Turns out, art degree doesn't automatically equal art job. But I'll figure it out. I know you will. Would you be willing to give me your phone number again? I know you've been avoiding everyone's calls, but I'd like to stay in touch if you want to. I studied his face. Gone was the entitled younger brother who'd taken family support for granted. The person sitting across from me seemed genuinely humbled by what he'd learned. On one condition. Anything. If mom and dad try to use you to guilt me into resuming the payments, you shut it down. I won't be manipulated through you anymore. Done. We talked for another hour. About his job search, about my new apartment, about the family dynamics that had kept us all trapped in unhealthy patterns for years. It was the first real conversation we'd had since we were kids. As we were getting ready to leave, Lucas said something that surprised me. Emily, I want you to know that I think you're the strongest person in our family. It took courage to stand up at that party. It took even more courage to stick to your decision when everyone started pressuring you. I don't feel strong, I feel tired. That's because you've been carrying all of us for years. But you're free now, and I'm going to make sure you stay that way. 3 months later, I got a call from Mom. Not angry this time, not demanding, just tired. Emily, we need to talk. Okay, your father and I have been seeing a financial counselor and a family therapist. That was not what I'd expected her to say. Oh, we're learning some things about ourselves that are difficult to face, about how we've treated you over the years. I waited. We want to apologize. Really apologize, not just say we're sorry because we want things to go back to the way they were. We want to understand how we failed you so badly without even realizing it. The conversation that followed was awkward and painful and necessary. My parents acknowledged for the first time that they had been taking my support for granted while giving Lucas all their attention and praise. They admitted that they had rewritten the family narrative to make themselves feel better about accepting my money. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when they slipped back into old patterns, when they tried to justify their behavior or minimize my sacrifice. But it was a start. 6 months after Lucas's birthday party, we had our first family dinner since the confrontation. Lucas had gotten a job teaching art classes at a community center. It didn't pay much, but it was honest work and he was proud of it. My parents had downsized to a smaller house and were living within their means for the first time in years. And me, I was thriving. I'd gotten a promotion at work partly because I was no longer constantly stressed about money. James and I had moved in together to that beautiful apartment he'd suggested almost a year earlier. I was saving money, taking vacations, living like the successful young professional I'd always been, but never felt like. Most importantly, I was visible. When I spoke, people listened. When I achieved something, it was celebrated. When I needed support, it was offered. Lucas raised his glass at dinner that night. To Emily, he said, for teaching us all what boundaries look like. To family, I corrected, to learning how to love each other better. As I drove home that night, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Invisible, exhausted, giving everything and getting nothing back. She felt like a stranger to me now. I'd learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. I'd learned that love without respect isn't really love at all. And I'd learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who need to earn that love back. But most importantly, I'd learned that I was worth fighting for, even if I had to do the fighting myself. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever wondered whether your sacrifices matter, if you've ever struggled with setting boundaries with people you love, I want you to know that your story matters. Your needs matter. You matter. And sometimes standing up for yourself is the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe for more real stories about family relationships and finding your voice when it matters most.